in partnership with Listener Auditorium at George Washington University, Politics and Prose is thrilled to host John Green with his brother Hank Green on the second stop of their 19-city bus tour in support of John's new novel, Turtles All the Way Down. When he won the Prince Award for his young adult debut, Looking for Alaska, John Green has distinguished himself as a master of smart, contemporary, literary novels with genuine and relatable characters. In addition to Looking for Alaska, Green is the best-selling and award-winning author of An Abundance of Catherines, Paper Towns, and The Fault in Our Stars, the last two of which have also been made into major motion pictures. Additionally, along with David Levithan, Green is the co-author of Will Grayson, and collaborator with Lauren Miracle and Maureen Johnson on Let It Snow, 3 Holiday Romances. Hank Green is a producer, vlogger, entrepreneur, and gifted musician. His debut novel, An Absolutely Remarkable Thing, will be published next fall. Co-hosts of the Vlog Brothers, one of the most popular online video projects in the world. Vlog Brothers launched 10 years ago, and John and Hank continue to upload 2 videos a week to their YouTube channel. In 2011, the brothers launched the educational YouTube channel Crash Course and are involved with a myriad of other video projects. But tonight, we're here for John Green's first new young adult novel since The Fault in Our Stars was published nearly 6 years ago. Please join me in welcoming John and Hank Green.
This is my new book, Turtles All the Way Down. I'm going to read to you for a little bit from the book. I think all you need to know going into this is that the story is narrated by a 16-year-old girl named Asa who struggles with obsessive thought spirals and uses kind of compulsive behaviors to manage those thought spirals, one of which is that she digs her thumbnail into the finger pad of her middle finger, and she's been doing this since she was a little kid. And so this callus is opened up, or this callus is formed up on her fingertip, and so it's very easy to kind of cut open the skin, kind of crack the skin, and she does that a lot when she worries that there might be infection underneath the callus. And she has just met this boy, Davis, who she knew when they were kids, but they haven't seen each other in a long time. Asa and her best friend Daisy go and kind of arrange to meet with Davis, and then after spending some time together, Davis is driving them home. Also takes place in Indianapolis. Thank you to the 3 Indianapolis people who are here, presumably interning for some kind of congressperson. Although only the river separated us, it was a 10-minute winding drive back to my house because there's only one bridge in my neighborhood. We were quiet except for my occasional directions, and when we at last pulled into my driveway, I asked for his phone and typed my number into it. Daisy got out without saying goodbye, and I was about to do the same, but when I gave him the phone back, Davis took my right hand and turned it over palm up. "I remember this," he said, and I followed his eyes down to the Band-Aid covering my fingertip. I pulled my hand away and closed my fingers into a fist. "Does it hurt?" he asked. For some reason, I wanted to tell him the truth. Whether it hurts is kind of irrelevant. That's a pretty good life motto, he said. I smiled. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, I should go. Right before I closed the door, he said, it's good to see you, Asa. Yeah, I said. You too. When I got home, I watched TV with Mom, but I couldn't stop thinking about Davis looking down at my finger, holding my hand in his. I have these thoughts that Dr. Karen Singh calls intrusives, but the first time she said it, I heard invasives, which I like better because, like invasive weeds, these thoughts seem to arrive at my biosphere from some faraway land, and then they spread out of control. I guess everyone has them. You look out from over a bridge or whatever, and it occurs to you out of nowhere that you could just jump. And then if you're like most people, you think, well, that was weird, and you move on with your life. But for some people, the invasive can kind of take over, crowding out all the other thoughts until it's the only thought you're able to have, the one you're perpetually either thinking or distracting yourself from. You're watching TV with your mom, this show about time-traveling crime solvers, and you remember a boy holding your hand, looking at your finger, and then a thought occurs to you. You should unwrap that Band-Aid and check to see if there's an infection. You don't actually want to do this. It's just an invasive. Everyone has them. But you can't shut yours up. Since you've had a reasonable amount of cognitive behavioral therapy, you tell yourself, I am not my thoughts, even though deep down you're not sure exactly what that makes you. And then you tell yourself to click a little X in the top corner of the thought to make it go away, and maybe it does for a moment. You're back in your house on the couch next to your mom, and then your brain says, well, but wait. What if your finger's infected? Why not just check? The cafeteria wasn't exactly the most sanitary place to reopen that wound. And then you were in the river. Now you're nervous because you've previously attended this exact rodeo on thousands of occasions, and also because you want to choose the thoughts that are called yours. But the river was filthy, after all. Had you gotten some river water on your hand, it wouldn't take much. Time to unwrap the Band-Aid. You tell yourself that you were careful not to touch the water, but then yourself replies, but what if you touched something that touched the water? And then you tell yourself that that the wound is almost certainly not infected, but the distance you've created with that almost gets filled by the thought. You need to check for infection. Just check it so we can calm down. And then fine, okay, you excuse yourself to the bathroom and slip off the Band-Aid to discover that there isn't blood, but there might be a bit of moisture on the bandage pad. You hold the Band-Aid up to the yellow light in the bathroom, and yes, that definitely looks like moisture. It could be sweat, of course, but also might be water from the river, or worse still, seropurulent drainage, a sure sign of infection. So you find the hand sanitizer in the medicine cabinet and squeeze some onto your fingertip, and it burns like hell. And then you wash your hands thoroughly, singing your ABCs while you do to make sure you've scrubbed for the full 20 seconds recommended by the Centers for Disease Control. And then you carefully dry your hands with a towel, and then you dig your thumbnail all the way into the crack in the callus until it starts bleeding. And you squeeze the blood out for as long as it comes. And then you blot the wound dry with a tissue. And you take a Band-Aid from inside your jeans pocket, where there is never a shortage of them, and you carefully reapply the bandage. You return to the couch to watch TV, and for a few or many minutes, you feel the shivering jolt of the tension easing, the relief of giving in to the lesser angels of your nature. And then 2 or 5 or 600 minutes later, you start to wonder, wait, did I get all the pus out? Was there pus even, or was that just sweat? If it was pus, you might need to drain that wound again. And the spiral tightens like that forever. Thanks. So in that scene, Asa can't pay attention to the TV show she's ostensibly watching. Earlier in the novel, she fails to notice that her best friend has dyed her hair. She can't pay attention in conversations. In short, she is a truly terrible detective. Obsessiveness and observational genius have been linked for a long time in the popular imagination, from Sherlock to the TV show Monk, and I'm sure that must be true to some people's experience, but it is not true to Asa's, or for that matter, to mine. I wanted to write a detective story about a detective whose brain disorder is distinctly unhelpful. And although the book is entirely fictional, and Aza's challenges are very different from mine, when it came to writing about her mental illness, I was writing partly from within my own experience. I had a very happy childhood. My parents were kind and supportive and deeply loving. I had wonderful friends, a great brother, but I was not a very happy child. A lot of my childhood was consumed with obsessive worry and dread. As a kid, it was often a fear of poisoning. I would become convinced that I'd eaten something that was definitely going to kill me, and I couldn't stop worrying about it no matter what I did, and eventually I developed behaviors to cope with this worry because I would lose hours to it every day. I'd only eat certain foods at certain times. I'd only sit in certain chairs at the cafeteria. I now realize, of course, that I had and still have obsessive-compulsive disorder, but at the time, I didn't know that. I had no way to give expression or form to the experience of my thoughts because it was so deep down and abstract and scary. I couldn't talk about it the way you talk about a chair or a table. I lacked language for the fear and the pain that it caused me, which made it all the more painful and also more isolating. It felt like all the time there was a real monster, like an actual monster, but it lived inside of me. It felt like I was stuck inside of a prison that was the exact size and shape of my body. It's easy to say what it felt like. It's hard to say what it was. In fact, it's still hard to say what it is. And most of all, it made me feel like a passenger in my own consciousness. If I can't stop thinking these thoughts that I don't want to have, then whose thoughts are they exactly? Who's the captain of this ship I call myself? It's clearly not myself. It's the monster's self. I'm just riding shotgun. And in Turtles All the Way Down, Aza's lack of control over her thoughts is hugely destabilizing to her sense of self. She has to navigate a constantly fracturing and collapsing understanding of what or who she is. But she doesn't only have to build a definition of self that's independent from her intrusive thoughts and the behaviors that she uses to help manage them. She also has to figure out how to escape what she calls the skin-encased bacterial colony known as Aza, long enough to imagine the lives of others with compassion and some semblance of real understanding, which I think is the actual key to solving any mystery, and also is a challenge for each of us. So I have a story about this. You may have heard it before, and if you have, I apologize, but I will tell it better this time. So in 2003, when the US-led coalition forces invaded Iraq, I was living in Chicago with 3 roommates, Katie, Shannon, and Hassan. And my roommate Hassan was from Kuwait, but a lot of his extended family lived in Iraq, and he was out of touch with them for several weeks, and it was extremely stressful and scary. And the way that he kind of dealt with this was to watch cable news 24 hours a day. Like, he was always either at work or on the couch watching, usually Fox News. And if you wanted to hang out with him, you had to sit on the couch with him and watch the news. So one day, we were watching the news together. And it was one of those situations where like new footage is coming in to the studio, and the anchor is seeing it for the first time, but because he has a microphone, he's an expert. And a camera's panning across a home in Baghdad that has a huge hole in a wall, and the hole is mostly covered by a piece of plywood. And on that plywood is scrawled in black spray paint, very angry-looking Arabic graffiti, and the guy on TV is talking about the anger on the Arab street or whatever. And my friend Hassan starts to laugh. And I said, "What's so funny?" And he said, "The graffiti." I said, "What's funny about it?" And he said, "It says, 'Happy birthday, sir, despite the circumstances.'" So it seems to me that like the central challenge of a human life is that on a minute-by-minute basis, it is almost impossible to consider the "happy birthday, sir, despite the circumstances" possibility, right? We project our biases and expectations and experiences and so on onto everyone and everything else because we are stuck with just this one consciousness. We look at the world in just this one way. And I would like to tell you that I think stories are some magical way out of that problem, that reading and writing can make you purely empathetic so that you know exactly what it's like to be someone else, but I just don't believe that. I do think stories can help us to empathize, but I don't think they can ever tell us precisely what someone else's life is like. And that's why we mustn't think that reading a book, or even many books, makes us qualified to speak over other people or on behalf of them. But I think we can get better at listening, and at crediting others with personhood, and at understanding and remembering that everyone does have a birthday. And for me at least, the best way I've found to improve my listening is through stories. My kids are my kids. My parents are my parents. But in To Kill a Mockingbird, Scout isn't mine anything. Instead, I'm asked to live inside of her consciousness, to see the world as she sees it. I think every novel is a way out of your life and into others. In Turtles All the Way Down, I wanted to give people a look at what it's like to be stuck with a mind that doesn't always feel yours, and also maybe help people who struggle with that terror to feel less alone in it. Reading and writing aren't only about empathy, of course, but I do think ultimately that's why I read and write. I'm trying to remind myself, convince myself that other people are real, that their love and loss is as real and as important as my own. And each time I relearn that truth, I understand that I too am real, that I may not always control my thoughts, but that I am nonetheless a real creature, a singular noun, capable of loving and being loved. Not just capable of love, in fact, but also worthy of it. Thank you. It's so great to be here. We're so excited to be on the road together, my brother and I. It's an absolute blast so far. It's day 2, so it's early. But the most interesting thing so far, I have to say, hasn't been the time that I've been able to spend with my brother, but the time I've been able to spend with the presenter. It's my pleasure to bring out right now. I think you're really going to enjoy getting to know him. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Lawrence Turtleman.
Hello, kids! There's a lot of you. My name is Dr. Lawrence Turtleman, professor of turtle studies. Really excited that the Green Brothers brought me out here to talk to you today because I want to discuss some of the areas of my expertise, phylogeny and taxonomy. Is this thing on? Maybe my hand got in the way. I know that a lot of us spend a lot of time at night thinking, boy, I know that phylogeny and taxonomy are related, but are they different things? And if so, what are the differences? Well, phylogeny, as you may know, is also called phylogenetics. And so that last part of the word, genate, comes from genetics, and philo is from the same root as phyle, which is so it's like a genetic filing cabinet. It's a categorization system based on genetics, which is why I included a filing cabinet on that slide. That went too fast. Now, taxonomy is completely different. It's related because, it's in regards to how we classify organisms. But taxonomy was created before we knew what genetics even was. In fact, Carl Linnaeus, the father of taxonomy, Everybody can applaud for Carl if you want to. I know that he's the hero. Everybody's a big fan of Carl. He created taxonomy 100 years before Charles Darwin was even born, which is pretty impressive when you think about it because we still use many of his systems. In fact, in biology class, you probably learned these, what are called taxa. Domain, kingdom, phylum. I'm looking at the screen because even though I am a professor of turtle studies, I've also forgotten these things since school. Class, order, family, genus, and species. These are called taxa. Taxa is also in the singular called a taxon, and a taxon is any of those categories. Now, if there's only one thing in the category, in the taxon below the taxon you're looking at, you call that a monotypic taxa. And monotypic taxa, there are lots of them. For example, this is the indigo macaw, and there is only one species of indigo macaw. There are no subspecies. And so you would call that a monotypic species. But could you get weirder than that? A genus can be monotypic if there's only one species in that genus, and that's the case for the chocolate chip star, which is a really cool looking starfish. That's all I know about this chocolate chip star. But could you get even more rare than that? Could you have a family that only has one genus, that only has one species, and there are no subspecies? Well, why you can. The bearded reedling is a bird. It's a cute-looking bird that is the only species in its family. That's all I know about the bearded reedling. I went too fast again. But could there be something even more rare than that? Now, the order on our example here of the red fox is carnivoral. That's a really broad order. You could probably think a lot about carnivores, but could you have an order that only has, this is not getting better night to night, that only has one family, one genus, and one species? I already kind of ruined this one, but there are three. Everybody loves it when you mess up. That's the best part of the show. But I know what you're asking. Dr. Turtleman, what are they? The first one is the Aardvark, order Tubulidentae. It only has one species in the entire order. Now you might think to yourself, but I've seen lots of anteaters. The Aardvark is not a South American anteater. It's native to Africa, where it has quite a large range. But despite its success, all of its ancestors are dead. In fact, one of its closest living relatives is this little guy, the elephant shrew, which I mostly included because of how cute it is. But also because of this weird fact about the elephant shrew. When we first found the first elephant shrew, and by we, I mean, Europeans. We were like, that's a shrew. It looks kind of like an elephant because it's got that funny nose thing. But it turns out, when we started doing phylogenetic studies instead of taxonomic ones, we were able to determine that the elephant shrew is more related to the elephant than to the shrew. Yeah. Sometimes it's not just funny, it's also interesting. Well, what else do we got, Dr. Turtleman? Well, let me tell you. We got the Watson. Order Opisthocomiformes. The Watson is a South American bird that diverged from other birds around 64 million years ago, just after the dinosaurs went extinct. That's how long it's been since these guys shared an ancestor with a bird. They're real weird. Now you might think, birds, they're all the same. They're not. These guys, weirdos. They eat leaves. They're ruminants. They're like cows with wings. Watson, you look at them and you're like, that thing's not normal. But in addition, because of their weird diets, they produce a lot of waste, which is why in South America, they're commonly referred to as the stink bird. And finally, our last monotypic order is the order Rhynchocephaly. The tuatara looks like a lizard. It shares the body form with a lizard because it shares ancestors with a lizard. But in fact, tuatara are around as related to a lizard as a bird is to a crocodile. These things are super weird, and they have been sheltered from competition from other organisms, which has allowed them to maintain a sort of living fossil status that allows us to understand a great deal more about the evolution of lizards and snakes. And we almost lost them, and weren't able to learn all the things that they've been able to teach us because they went extinct on the mainland of New Zealand, where they were protected from all of these newer, fancier body forms. But luckily, there's a bunch of islands outside of the mainland of New Zealand where tuatara were able to survive, and then were recently reintroduced to the mainland. It's very exciting. Congratulations, tuatara! As we've begun to understand phylogenetics in addition to taxonomy, we see not only that we share certain body forms with organisms, but also that we all share a common ancestor with them, that we all come from similar places. Sometimes you'll hear people say that the dinosaurs are still with us, and that birds are dinosaurs. That is thinking phylogenetically. Because in phylogenetics, no matter what, you are always the thing that you once were. So we are all related, and birds are still dinosaurs, because that is their ancestors. And so you, humans, also a monotypic species, by the way, are a mammalian, amniotic, tetrapodal, sarcopterygian, osteichthyon, gnathostomal, vertebrate, cranial chordate. And that sounds pretty cool. The really weird thing about that is that this word osteichthyon here means bony fish. Because you are all bony fishes, because all terrestrial vertebrates were descended from the bony fishes. Even me, a turtle man. Thinking phylogenetically allows us to understand that all of us are related. All of us are of the same family, even turtle men. Thank you very much. My name is Dr. Larry Turtleman. I'm available to give talks at all of your local events. It's around $500. It's really a little bit expensive, but I'm trying to feed a lot of turtle babies. Thank you very much, and have a lovely night. Thank you for being with us. Now I'd like to bring back out my friend John Green.
I want to answer a few questions about turtles all the way down. No spoilers. The book came out yesterday. Most of you got your copies 30 minutes ago. I suspect most of you haven't finished it yet. But first I want to answer this question from Amanda, who wrote, I came all the way from Pittsburgh. Can I have a turtle, please? I have terrible news, Amanda. And not just one piece of terrible news, but two pieces. First, no. You can't have a turtle. I don't have one, and I don't even know if it's legal for me to give you one. I think that might be regulated for now. Secondly, Amanda, I know this is going to disappoint you, and it's going to disappoint many turtle enthusiasts, including, I'm sure, Dr. Larry Turtleman. My book does not contain very many turtles. I mean, it contains an infinite collection of turtles, but they're mostly used symbolically. And that brings me to the second question, which comes from Jesse. Will the reason for the title be revealed in the story? Yes, but not before it is revealed right now. I don't think this is a spoiler because you can just Google this. And lots of people have. I didn't invent the Turtles All the Way Down story. Lots of people, when I announced the title, got mad at me because there's a great country musician, Sturgill Simpson, who has a song, Turtles All the Way Down. And they were like, why is he ripping off Sturgill Simpson? And I was like, Sturgill Simpson and I are both ripping off a story that goes back like 150 years and nobody knows who first told it or who it's about. So, there's this scientist giving an hour-long lecture in a big lecture hall about how the Earth is, billions of years old, and it's a sphere that formed out of stardust or whatever. I don't actually know that much about the history of the Earth. And, life emerged near undersea volcanoes or whatever a few billion years ago, and then slowly became more complex and crawled out of the oceans, and so that we are all still bony fish, and then eventually humans emerged like 250,000 years ago, and then it was now. And at the end of this big long lecture, somebody in the back raises their hand and says, that's all fine and good, Mr. Scientist, but the truth is, the Earth is a flat plane resting on the back of a giant turtle. And the scientist thinks, oh, I can have some fun with this. And so he says, well, if that's true, what is the turtle standing on? And the woman says, well, that turtle's standing on yet a larger turtle. And then the scientist says, well, what is that turtle standing on? And she says, no, you don't understand, sir. It's turtles all the way down. And I like this story a lot because, well, for two reasons. First off, when I first heard the story, I thought it was a story that was making fun of superstition, about how dumb superstition is. But now I realize that it is a story about how two people can both be right. Because I think obviously the world is a billions-of-year-old sphere. I'm not a flat earther, but I also think that the world is the stories we tell about it, and that the stories we tell about it have real import and impact, and the stories we tell about ourselves and each other are true and real and important. The other thing is that in a lot of places in my life, when I've been sick, I feel that I am looking for the bottom turtle in a situation in which there is no bottom turtle because it's turtles all the way down. This next question comes from Bree, who writes in really phenomenal handwriting. John, other than a deadline, how do you know when your book is done enough to share? I have a hard time sharing my writing. Well, Bree, I spent 6 years writing this book, and I also have a hard time sharing my writing. It's very scary. It's overwhelming to show. It's actually harder to show it to like one or two people you really love than it is to show it to a group of people who, frankly, you actually can't see because you have them turn down the light so much. It's really hard, and I think it should be hard, because if it's not hard, then it's not important to you. And you want your writing to feel important to you, and you want to feel like you're communicating something that feels urgent to you and significant, and like you desperately want people to hear the story, and you are genuinely hopeful that it will be useful to them, or that they'll respond to it in some way that will be beneficial to them. You want it to be a gift, right? And anytime you give somebody a gift, it's scary, because what if they hate it? Or what if like you kind of went over the top? Like what if it wasn't an appropriate gift? There's all kinds of anxiety when you give someone you care about a gift. And I think that's very similar to the anxiety of sharing your writing. As for how you get over that, I don't know, Bree, how do you get over that? I think it's important to I think you have to remember why you're doing what you're doing. And you have to be able to interrogate why you're doing it, to borrow a phrase, all the way down. Like you have to be able to know that you're making it as a gift, and that you want to share it because of that impulse rather than because of any other impulse. And as for how you know you're done, when you can't go on any longer and you cannot make it any better and fiddling is making it worse, that's when it's time to show it to someone and have that person tell you which 80% of it you have to delete. It's my experience anyway. And the last question I want to answer is from Jessica, who writes, what was it like writing about mental illness? There were several questions that were in this category. One was about whether or not I feel like it's important to be mentally ill to be a great artist, and I don't. In fact, some of my favorite writers are entirely sane. And I think there is obviously a huge problem with stigmatization of mental illness in our culture, but I think there is also a problem with romanticizing mental illness in our culture. Like if you Google all artists are, if you Google all artists are, Google autofills mad. I don't think that's true. I also don't think that it's a helpful way to look at creative output. It is true that people who work in creative fields have higher than average rates of mental illness. It is also true that lawyers have higher than average rates of mental illness. But you never see people say like, oh, you want to be a lawyer? Better ride that line, you know? Better try to be as sick as you can be and still work. It's a terrible idea. You know, the truth is that I couldn't write about mental illness when I was sick. Like when I'm very sick, I can't write anything, I can't read anything for that matter. And so my experience has been that I write best when I am treating the chronic health problem that I have like a chronic health problem. You know, when I'm treating it with consistency and care, when I'm taking my medication, when I'm doing this stupid therapy stuff that works, even though it's stupid and annoying. And I really wanted to share that because while I do think that I don't want to be embarrassed about the fact that I have a mental illness, I also want to share with you that I think it's possible, and in fact quite likely and common, to have a rich and fulfilling and wonderful and long and happy life while also living with a chronic mental illness. And my work is best when I'm taking it seriously and when I'm taking my health seriously. So, that's my answer to that question. I'm very sorry for all the questions we didn't answer. There were so many good ones. I'm deeply apologetic. But now I would like to welcome back to the stage my brother Hank, so we can talk to you about issues that are important to us.
Is this the first time I've been on the stage, John?
Oh, right. Can I have half those questions? Thanks, that's not half, but I'm not mad. Hank,
Oh, I forgot a thing.
yeah, you really only have one job. So, while Hank's gone, I'm just gonna give you some background. I don't know the whole story here, and I might be mistelling it. I don't want to apologize if I am, but I'm just gonna tell the story as I imagine it to be true. So, when Hank and I were on tour in 2012, I'm gonna just take that from you, thank you. Two nerd fighters named Sarah and Luis met at this, I believe at the Washington DC event in 2012, like 5.5 years ago. And they've never, okay, yeah, you do that. They've never met before this moment. Just go ahead and open it, because I would actually like half a glass. And they're getting married in 3 days. It could be a little more than that. I don't know for sure, but it's this week. And they were like, I don't know if we can come to your event. There's a lot of stressful wedding planning. So but I think that, boy, they better be here. I think they're here. So Sarah and Luis, if you're here, could you just come up real quick? Just walk toward the front and we'll see you. Did I do it? All right. Hey guys, how's it going? Congratulations. Did I tell the story okay? All right, great. First off, cheers. Share for the rest of the show. And then we got you a present. You actually know what it is because we got it off your registry and you saw my name. It's a KitchenAid mixer. We're doing that in every city.
Welcome to Dear Hank and John.
What's up for Dear John and Hank?
It's a comedy podcast about death where two brothers answer your questions, give you news, advice, and bring you all the week's news from both Mars and the AFC Wimbledon. John, how you doing?
Mixed. I mean, I'm so happy for Sarah and Luis. That's the main thing. What a journey they're embarking upon. And with, I would argue, the best mixer. I picked that up registry because we have that mixer and we got it for our wedding, and it's one of the few things we got for our wedding that like hasn't broken in the interim. So I hope you enjoy it. I noticed you didn't register for monogrammed highball glasses, which is my usual wedding gift, and I didn't want to be presumptuous.
It's good to, I mean, what I feel like is if you're gonna give me something for my wedding that I'm gonna really use, give me like 50 of them. Because I'm gonna break that stuff.
That's the thing.
That's just gonna happen.
That's the thing my Uncle Baxter did. He sent me 50 monogrammed highball glasses, and I was like, this is stupid. Well, 12 years later, you know, we're down to like 24.
You have children.
Yeah.
They just throw things. Highball.
Hank,
Yeah.
do you know what your phrase of the week is?
Yes, I remember
Okay,
it.
great. We do this bit where we both have a phrase of the week, but we don't know what the others is, and at the end of the show, we're gonna guess. All right. Let's answer the questions from our listeners.
Okay, do it.
Oh, I thought you were gonna start, but I'll start. This is a great question from Katie. Dear John and Hank, what yet unanswered question do you most hope to see answered in your lifetimes, scientific or otherwise?
There's somebody asked that this later in this deck, I think, how do you know what you want? So maybe that. How do I know what I want? I'm supposed to want stuff.
Or just what do I want?
Yeah.
I would like to know, like, very selfishly, I have a bunch of public health questions.
Yeah.
Like, what causes my brain problem, and is there perhaps a slightly sharper instrument to treat it with than the relatively blunt instruments of current psychiatry? Apologies to the psychiatrists out there. Also, I apologize to the psychologists in the audience for saying that therapy stuff is stupid. It does work, but it is also stupid.
I want to know if there's life out there, John. I want to know if there's non-related to us living things.
Yes.
And I know there is. But I want to know all about it. I want to know how they make babies. I want to know what their chemistry is based on. Those two things mostly. I want to write a book about extraterrestrial doing it. I call that, by the way. Can I do that? It's like shotgun, but it's like, no, I get to write the book on extraterrestrial doing it. Like they're all like language in Arrival, and I'm like, no, how'd they do it though?
It'll be interesting, like, what is alien life made out of? Because it almost definitely isn't made out of DNA.
Right.
And that's so weird.
Mm-hmm. That's how we'll know. And there's some thought to like, well, all of our tools for figuring out whether there's like a living thing going on is based on our chemistry, and so we need new tools if we're going to try and figure out if life is happening other ways.
What if Mars is alive and we just can't tell?
I mean, like the whole planet is just like it's like a giant Pac-Man, but sleeping. Just a sleepy Pac-Man.
Or it's just not eating. Because it doesn't need to eat, because it's a different kind of life.
It's true. I don't really know how Pac-Man works.
Yeah.
What's Pac-Man doing?
He eats the dots, and then he tries to not get bitten by the ghosts, except when he's recently eaten a big dot. It's not a great game now. I just got, for our trip, I got the Nintendo, the tiny little classic Nintendo, and I remember those Nintendo games being so good in 1986. They're not. Like, they're not great.
Yeah.
Anyway, what's the next question?
We've upgraded. This is from Kim and Nikki. Dear Hank and John, have you had to fight one elephant-sized puppy or 100 puppy-sized elephants? What would you choose? What by fight? What do you mean by fight? Like, could I wrestle them? Like just fun time wrestle times? Is it like basically cuddling? I want to cuddle these things.
Is it to the death?
Oh no.
Because that's dark. Like, can it just be until like there's a stalemate? In which case, I would definitely pick the elephant-sized puppy because it would be an immediate stalemate. You know, like, I would be like, I don't want to hurt you, and it would be like, I also don't want to hurt you, and then it would be over. Elephants, I don't trust as much.
I don't know, man. I've met a lot of puppies who'd mess you up if they were the size of an elephant. Mess you up. All of you gone. Just made a mush.
Actually, you're right. Like they would eat you in one bite.
Well, I think they'd just like be like, hello! If it was cuddle, I don't know. Like, I think the better question is, which would you rather cuddle with? I like a bunch of elephants or like one big puppy. Oh man, I want to cuddle a big puppy.
All right, we're moving on to the next question. This question comes from Amy, who writes, Dear John and Hank, is it okay to feed birds? This is underlined, that's why I'm emphasizing every word of it. Is it okay to feed birds on a college campus if it's with proper bird seed? Amy, thank you for inserting us into what I assume is an intense argument at George Washington University. I can't tell you how grateful I am for this opportunity to be divisive about a subject I know nothing about.
Well, I also know nothing about this, so let me take a gander. Let me just, oh, that's a bird pump. What you gotta say is, like, I don't know, I'm just assuming what the argument that is being had is, do not feed the birds is not a question about bird health. We're not like, oh, should the birds eat pizza? What if they're unhealthy? Like, what if they get diarrhea? No, that's not what the problem is. The do not feed the birds is a bird as pest problem. The more you feed the birds, the more birds there are, the more bird poop there is, the more dead birds there are, which is a thing that you don't have to worry about, but maintenance does. And so I think that's. I've had to clean up a lot of dead birds because my office had an entrance in the fire escape, and there would always be pigeons who were making bad decisions. And so I know what that's like, and I'm not a fan. And so in general, like a low maintenance level pigeon population is A+.
I mean, like Hank, I have no idea what the answer to your question is.
But I said a bunch of words though. It was good, even though I had no idea what I was talking about.
What's your next question?
Hey, it's from Tommy. How do you know what you want?
So,
That's a great question.
I know exactly what I want, but I also know that I can never have it. What I want more than anything is to be the guy who plays bass guitar in Hank Green's band. Like, I always, growing up, I wanted to be...
What about Paul?
Oh yeah, he's great. You're a real bassist, it's lovely. But, growing up, I always wanted to be the bass player in REM, which was a band of my childhood. And, I really, that seemed to me the ideal position in the band, because, you're on stage and you get to sing back up, but you aren't like Michael Stipe famous, who, for those who don't know, is the lead singer of REM. And, I don't know, that just always seemed, that was always my dream. And of course I can't live it, as anyone who has ever heard me sing or play the bass guitar knows.
I mean, John, if you try sometimes you might find that at least you get what you need. But you're not going to get what you want. I enjoy looking at children because they seem to know what they want. And I'm like, yes, teach me, child, to have direction toward chicken nuggets, at least. Because even that I can't feel unambivalent about. Wait, yes, correct. I did the right grammar. John, do you have another question for us?
Sure, this question, I think it's from Anonymous. They didn't write their name. It says, Dear John and Hank, I look forward to reading your book. Hank's book doesn't come out for a year.
We didn't co-write this turtle thing.
No, but I look forward to reading Hank's book. He still hasn't shown it to me. As a parent with children who are challenged by anxiety and depression, I'm interested to know what advice you might have for parents in my shoes, how best to help my young adult children move through life with mental illness. It's a great question, and I mean, I think the first thing is to try to get them good care, which unfortunately is extremely difficult in our country and in a lot of places. Mental health care is just not treated the same as other kinds of health care, and it's really unfortunate. So I think like persevering through that process with them, helping them make the appointments and keep them, helping them, you know, figure out what's gonna work for them, because mental illness is treatable. People do experience, you know, go on to live great lives, as I talked about before. But I think that's a huge thing, and then the only other thing that you can do, I think, is love them where they are and as who they are. One of the hardest things about being a parent, in my experience, is that all you want to do is take pain away from your kids, and you can't, right? Like, I mean, you never can. Whatever kind of pain they're going to experience, and they're all going to experience some pain, like you can't take away from them. That's a very hard thing to accept and to live with, but it's the nature of the game. So I think you have to love people where they are.
Dear Hank and John, Amanda asks, if you had to leave your money to one animal, like a tuatara, what would you choose? I have a good answer for this.
You go.
We're all bony fishes, so my son. He's also an animal.
That's a cop-out. You gotta go with
Correct, but I got to call back to Dr. Turtleman's talk.
Okay.
Did you see it?
I did. I think you didn't see my previous bony fish callback, because I think you were not watching me.
Oh, no. I mean, I was probably hanging with Dr. Turtleman backstage.
So this is one of, to me, like, the reason I wrote about this was that it is completely astonishing to me that in most states, including Indiana, you cannot leave your multi-billion-dollar fortune to a non-human animal, because of course you can't. But you can leave your billions of dollar estate to a corporation that exists only to benefit a single non-human animal, because corporations are, of course, people. This is a completely fascinating loophole that lots of weird rich people have used over the years. I'm serious, to leave their cats tens of millions of dollars. There are cats that, like, you know, have full-time staff and eat nothing but caviar or whatever cats like. And, yeah, so the answer is that in this hypothetical situation, I would rebel against the system and say I refuse to accept this ridiculousness. Leave your money to malaria research. Jesus Christ. I just lost all the pet lovers out there. I love my dog very much, but I don't think he needs $10 million or even $50. I mean, set him loose in the woods, Willie would be incredibly happy for whatever time remained to him, you know? Between that moment and the moment of the coyote eating him would be magical for him. I'm out of questions, man. You gave me like 4 questions. I told you it wasn't half. Thank you. This one comes, I haven't even read it. This is exciting. Dear John and Hank, first of all, thank you for everything. Thank you for everything, Alex. Secondly, what would you say to a creator who's afraid that their content, whether art or writing, won't matter, either because they don't think it's good or profound or because it may not have a wide reach? Alex.
Does anything matter? Once you start to look at it, it's like, don't look too much of that. Don't look too hard at mattering.
Oh, it's all in the brain. But that is legitimate, because it's all in the brain. Like, not just mattering, all of it. That's all there is.
Yeah, I agree.
Perception.
Right. Just because something doesn't have a wide reach doesn't mean it doesn't matter. You know, like if you think about the most, as an adult, when I think about the people who are most important to me as when I was a child, like, I don't think about celebrities. I don't think about people who had a broad reach. I think about people who had a very narrow but very deep reach. You know, like I was talking earlier tonight about my middle school librarian, who was an incredibly important person in my life. But, you know, who only worked with however many kids per year. And so I think thinking about, like, broad reach equaling good is, I know it's like the kind of like default way of thinking about what constitutes success in our culture, but I think it's flawed. Like, I think you can have, if one person reads your story and is profoundly impacted by it and remembers it in 40 years, that's cooler than making something that like lots of people watch that doesn't matter much to them, in my opinion.
Yeah. The other thing, like,
this is a great question.
In terms of creative progress, I think that like happiness comes much more from a place of getting better.
Yeah.
And like one day you like look back and you're like, wow, I sure couldn't play that chord, and now it's just nothing to me. Or I sure wouldn't have written something that good, and now that's sort of regular to me, and I can do it a lot. Like that, like understanding your own progress is, I think, where a lot of satisfaction comes from, rather than success. And I think ultimately satisfaction is the thing that we're trying to get to, that we actually want to get to when we talk about success. Happiness.
Hey, let's answer a couple more questions before we
Okay.
get to the all-important news from Mars and ASU Wimbledon.
Okay.
You ask your last question, and then I'll ask my last question.
That's a lot of pressure.
Okay, I can go first.
Okay.
I wanted to pick a really important one, and so...
Usually means it's a joke.
It usually does. It usually does. Yeah.
You said you were ready.
I was wrong. I lied. I want to go back in time when I said that and unsay it. Oh, is time travel possible? That's another unanswered question I would like answered. I mean, like, I know you can go forward at a pace of 1 minute per minute, but I mean proper time travel. Okay. What about the grandfather paradox? What happens there? Okay, what's going on? What's your question? I gotta save mine for the last question. It's so good.
All right. What is the purpose of the tan thing on the front of the book bag you sell at dftba.com? Do you know this little diamond thing on the back of backpacks with little slots in it?
Yes.
And it's there on a lot of backpacks, and everybody's like, okay, well that's there. Somebody makes those, cuts up a cow, and turns it into that, and puts it on backpacks.
Yeah.
It's a thing that happens.
Yeah.
So I know too much about manufacturing things because of how I run a merchandising company, and I don't know what that thing is called, but I know what it's for. It's basically just an attachment point if you want to like clip your keys on or something. It was originally a attachment point for like mattress pads, like for like those things that like campers would sleep on, and you would loop a thing around and snap it on it, but it was much bigger and very different looking, and it's just sort of shrunk down to be like, well, this is an area of the backpack that didn't have anything on it that was visually uninteresting, let's put this thing on it. So that's the answer to your question. I'm sure you're riveted. Facts, I know.
And this question comes from Andrew, who writes, Dear John and Hank, my husband thinks that eggs are dairy, but I say that dairy comes from a cow.
Where is your husband here? Can we all collectively ridicule him?
I mean, I don't...
This podcast is brought to you by dairy eggs. Dairy eggs, they're freaking cow eggs? What's happening?
It's true. And this podcast is additionally brought to you by Sleepy Pac-Man. Sleepy Pac-Man! Probably Hank's phrase of the week.
Podcast is additionally brought to you by, well, cuddling a giant puppy. Oh God, yeah, it's so cool, so puppy, so big.
And lastly, this podcast is brought to you by the backpacks at dftba.com. I'm trying to squeeze in some promo for, which I don't even think are for sale right now, actually. Yeah, I'm on the eggs are not dairy camp as well. Hank,
Yes.
what is the news from Mars this day?
So you know, sometimes the sun is like, Wah! And it has a big like electromagnetic explosion on the surface that throws a bunch of high energy particles into the interplanetary space.
A solar flare?
Correct. Yes. So the thing about solar flares is like sometimes we'll get solar flares on Earth, and they can even interrupt like satellite communication, even power grids sometimes. But that doesn't happen in a really long time. Let's cross our fingers it doesn't happen this year, because boy. But like it exists in the geography of space, so most of the massive solar flares go like not in the plane of the solar system. They just go up and out, or like where they go somewhere where the Earth isn't, and they pass through this empty space. It just happens that we get hit by a solar flare when we do, and so most of the big ones we get missed by. But Mars just got hit by one, a big one. And it is now the largest aurora we've ever witnessed on Mars. It's happening, and like yesterday and today. So there's a big, like if we were on Mars right now, we'd have to like worry about the high energy particles. So, you know, we'd all be like down in the bunker.
More reason not to go to Mars. Well, Hank, the news from America's favorite third-tier English soccer team, AFC.
Probably should have hyped up Mars a little bit more. The news from the best, second best planet, Mars.
The news from America's favorite third-tier English soccer team, AFC Wimbledon, is darkness everywhere. 12 games into the League One season, AFC Wimbledon have scored 5 goals. A lot of Americans complain that there's not enough goals in soccer. This time I agree with them. Also, there weren't enough goals in the U.S. men's national team's World Cup campaign. Dark times for an American soccer fan who loves fan-owned football in England. We're in the bottom 4. That's the relegation zone. That means that if we stayed there till the end of the season, we'd be in League 2, the bottom tier of English football. Don't want to go back there. Have to travel to places like Cheltenham. Made-up place names in England. So yeah, it's as bad as the solar flare situation in Mars, unfortunately. To bring us back up, Hank, can I guess what your phrase of the week was? Was it Pac-Man?
It was not.
Oh, dang it.
What was that? That's just my own genius. It was mattress pad, which I just got a really great moment for and was able to slip it without any issue.
That was my second guess.
Was it? Yeah.
Dang it. Talked myself into Pac-Man. I should have gone with my intuition.
You should have seen my face where I was like, see the
All right.
Pac-Man. Was it bass guitar?
It was.
Yes!
It was.
I knew you didn't want to be a bass guitar. It's the whole story.
I did. But I used it 3 times in an attempt to make you think, like, surely he wouldn't use it 3 times. It didn't work, apparently.
No, bad trick.
Thank you all for listening, and as they say in our hometown, don't forget to be awesome. Play some songs, Hank.
I'm going to play a few songs. I'm going to attempt to play them without my set list, which I left backstage. But there aren't that many songs because someone's calling me on my phone, and that's extremely embarrassing. Because it's a book reading, and usually there are no songs at book readings. But you get some. What just happened to you? You okay, buddy? There. Usually there are, So, I play music. I don't do it that often, but I really enjoy doing it. I mostly sing about science. So we had Dr. Turtleman, and now we have like science songs. It's a thing of books and science, which is not what it says on the poster. So I apologize to everyone who did not expect that, which is everyone. But I only apologize to the people who are disappointed. So, I'm going to sing a song about a fish. There is a fish in the deep sea, and it's very difficult to live in the deep sea. And so when you have no food, there aren't a lot of you around. That's sort of how ecology works. When there's more food, there's more organisms. And when there's very, very little food, then when it's time to make the next generation of fish, you have to work really hard to find another member of your own species. And if that is hard enough for us here in a very crowded theater, imagine how hard it is when you're the only fish within a cubic mile. So the deep sea anglerfish has figured out a solution to this problem, which is that when a male is born, like a female's just a normal fish, but when a male is born, it's just like a nose and some fins and testicles. And his entire mission in life, he doesn't even have a digestive system, so he cannot survive unless he sniffs out a female anglerfish, and if he finds her, he will bite her, and there's an enzyme in her skin that will dissolve his lips, and then their circulatory systems will fuse together, and he will be fed by her heart. We've all met this guy, right? And slowly his body will just like senesce into her body, and he'll just be a pair of nuts on her side. And then when it's time to make the next generation of anglerfish, she releases her eggs into the water, releases a hormone into her blood, which causes the testicles to release sperm into the water, and they join together, and that is how the next generation of anglerfish is born. And that story is so beautiful, I wrote a song about it. Here it is. Yes, it's true that I once went through life as a guy who always had to rhyme life with strife. Yes, I've been burned and I've been spurned, and through it all, my friends, I've learned that love is not about whether you get stabbed, it's how slow the knife gets turned. But my friends, I found an animal who doesn't feel this pain, and my life is so much better now that I can feel the same. Without light, you can't eat the dish. If you've only ever eaten fish, and you can't feel a load if it's all you've ever known. Yeah, the deep sea anglerfish has no reason to be happy, but it has no freaking idea what else to be. The deep sea dwelling anglerfish never has to find a mate. They are always there together when it's time to procreate. See, one dark night a young male lights a female on her side, and then slowly he becomes a sperm-producing parasite. And if we can say he lives at all, he lives until she dies, and until that day he literally never leaves her side. Oh, you can't eat the night if you live your whole life without light. You can't eat the dish if you've only ever eaten fish, and you can't feel a load if it's all you've ever known. Yeah, the deep sea anglerfish has no reason to be happy, but it has no freaking idea what else to be. Well, for years this rule has kept me out of worries. Despair, you simply do not feel what is always there. I ask my brain to entertain that pain is the same, that if I feel it all the time, can you really call it pain? Well, I don't have any friends and I don't have any hair, but neither does the anglerfish, and she doesn't care. Oh, you can't eat the night if you live your whole life without light. You can't eat the dish if you've only ever eaten fish, and you can't feel a load if it's all you've ever known. Yeah, the deep sea anglerfish has no reason to be happy, but it has no freaking idea what else to be. This next song is about the universe, because it's a pretty weird place. Well, a quirk can never exist by itself in isolation. Something very odd happens when you try to separate them. The energy it takes to break up those two best friends is just enough to create you more to join back up with them. And a photon has no mass, and those are troubles at light speed. If you could imagine going that fast, and if you try, I think you'd be emitted and absorbed both in the exact same instant, even if you traveled from a place 13 billion light years distant. 'Cause the universe is weird. Weird. I'm kind of freak. Oh, wrong key. Oh, shoot. What the heck is this all about? Infinite, unbounded sex. You'll never understand half of what we have, and at least that's what I fear. 'Cause the universe is weird. Hopefully it's gonna go better next time. Well, an electron has a strong charge as strong as a proton, and a tiny mass, but not non-existent like the photon. And you might want to take a seat now, because this might blow your mind. It has a mass and charge, but not apparently a size. And there's a lot of stuff all around you right now. Your chair, your friend, your planet, and your sister's neighbor's cow, and all that mundane mass and energy is all we know and understand. But it's only 4% of what the universe has at hand. 'Cause the universe is weird. I'm kind of freaking out. It's all about infinite, unbounded sex and hadronizing gluon jets. We'll never understand half of what we have, and at least that's what I fear. 'Cause the universe is weird. Well, I was riding a van with my brother, and I said, "Hey, John, guess what? Like, dude, no edge, 'cause the It's freaking me out. It's so weird. Why in the universe? Why in the universe? Is the universe so weird? So some science songs, but this is, after all, a Hank and John Green show, so there's also going to be stuff about like your life and how to deal with the world and the difficult parts and the good parts and how to take advantage of it all. Be a human, basically. So I don't sing this song a lot, but here it is. You never know if you don't go. You'll never shine if you don't glow. Hey, now you're an all-star. Get the game on, go play. Oh, hey, now you're a rock star. Get the show on, get paid. And all that glitters is gold. Only shooting stars break the mold. Well, it's a cold place, and they say it gets cold. You're bundled up now, wait till you get older. But the meteor man begs to differ. Judging by the hole in the satellite picture, the ice we skate is getting pretty thin. The water's getting warm, so you might as well swim. My world's on fire, how about yours? That's the way I like it and I never get bored. Oh, hey, now you're an all-star. Get the game on, go play. Oh, hey, now you're a rock star. Get the show on, get paid. And all that glitters is gold. Only shooting stars break the mold. Somebody wants gas. Could I spare some change for gas? I need to get myself away from this place. And I said, yeah, what a concept. I could use a little fuel myself, and we could all use a little change. Well, the years start coming and they don't stop coming. Back to the rules and I hit the ground running. Didn't make sense not to live for fun. Your brain gets smart, your head gets dumb. Oh, so much to do, so much to see. So what's wrong with taking the back streets? You never shine if you don't glow. You'll never know if you don't go. Hey, now you're an all-star. Get the game on, go play. Oh, hey, now you're a rock star. Get the show on, get paid. And all that glitters is gold. Only shooting stars break the mold. Like when Smash Mouth All-Star came out, I was like, dope tune, bro. And then like 6 months later, I was like, enough. And then 20 years went by. And the internet was like, wait. What if you listen to it 5,000 more times in 5,000 different ways? And you're like, I'm listening. And then you're like, you know, oh, okay, yeah, all right. This is a good song. It's not a complicated song, but it's a good song. I'm totally on board. I'm now a Smash Mouth All-Star fan. This is my last song before this little bit ends. But there's gonna be maybe a little more guitar later. We'll see. This is about quirks. Which is a weird thing to scream about. That's okay. A quark is a fundamental constituent of matter observed in 1968 through deep elastic scatter. We found that protons aren't as simple as we thought. We thought they were solid particles, but they are not. Protons, in fact, are made up of 3 separate pieces. It just gets more confusing as our knowledge increases, and that is what a quark is. It's a piece of a proton, and they also make up other things, including the neutron. Oh, up, down, straight, strong, top, bottom. If you don't know what a quark work is it don't matter, you still got them. And the left arms and both arms, unless something's amiss, they make up everything that we can see and that we know exists. Things made up of quarks, including protons and neutrons, are composite particles that physicists call hadrons. Many types of hadrons are theoretically described, but most exist for only very brief amounts of time. Quarks have electric charge, color charge, mass, and spin, and having color charge means they exist solely inside of other kinds of particles that cannot exist alone, which is why quarks have never been studied on their own. No up, down, strange charm, top, bottom. If you don't know what a quark is, it don't matter, you still got them. And with leptons and bosons, unless something's amiss, they make up everything that we can see and that we know exists. Well, quarks can join together in two different ways. Baryons and mesons but most instantly decay. If a particle has two quarks, then it's a baryon. If there's one quark and an antiquark, then it is a meson. These tiny bits of matter are part of almost everything, and there is no unified theory to make it less confusing. But the fact that we've identified that they exist at all is so freaking remarkable that I just sit in awe. Oh, up, down, strange charm, top, bottom. If you don't know what a quark is, it don't matter, you still got them. And the leptons and bosons, unless something's amiss, they make up everything that we can see and that we know exists.
Thanks, Hank. So I'm going to ask for a little bit of, just a small thing here. If we could bring up the house lights real quick. Thank you. I forgot to mention this to the people, but look how fast they did that anyway. Huge thanks to everybody at Lister Auditorium and also at Politics and Prose for just being the best. It's great. I really appreciate it. Did my first event at Politics and Prose almost 10 years ago, and it is pretty cool to be back here in this room. I was not in that room then. What you didn't really hear earlier, because you were cheering over it, which I appreciate, is the sound of New York saying hello to you. I'm going to ask you to say hello to Charlotte, where we will be tomorrow. So what I would like you to say, if you could, is, hello Charlotte, it's Washington, we love you. On three. That's a photograph. Okay. Hello, Charlotte. It's Washington. We love you. On three. 1, 2, 3. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. So before we leave tonight, I want to tell you a story about, you can bring the house lights all the way down now. I want to tell you a story about my friend Amy Cross Rosenthal, who died earlier this year. Amy was a children's book writer, and a memoirist and filmmaker, and a person who sought wonder in every human moment, and I've never known anyone like her. She also gave me one of my first big breaks as a writer, putting me on the radio in Chicago back in 2002. A couple of years later, she invited me to one of her readings, and at the time I was in one of my periods of sustained unwellness, unable to choose my thoughts. But that particular episode was accompanied by a chest-crushing depression. I found nothing enjoyable. I struggled to get out of bed, the usual. It was at once utterly boring and absolutely excruciating. Susan Sontag wrote that depression is melancholy minus its charms. I didn't want to go, but I felt obligated because Amy had done me this huge favor by getting me on the radio. I have to confess that I find relentless positivity really annoying. Like sometimes when talking to somebody who just loves the world with all of its joy and wonder, I want to grab them by the collar and scream, "To live is to suffer!" But Amy was never deluded in her optimism. She always acknowledged the darkness. One of the last lines she wrote, and one of my favorites, was, "Death may be knocking on my door, but I'm not getting out of this glorious bath to answer it." So anyway, I went to the event. I was alone and very nervous and stuck with these invasive thoughts that I couldn't stop having. And also, Amy kept wanting the audience to participate in the things that she was doing, and I hate audience participation. It always makes me very nervous because what if the audience doesn't deliver? And also, I am going to the show to be entertained, not to be part of the entertainment. And I was just in a terrible mood. And then Amy started talking about how in World War I, all these British soldiers who didn't understand their cause or why they were being asked to fight and die for tiny patches of ground far from home, started singing this song to the tune of that New Year's Eve song, Auld Lang Syne. We're here because we're here, because we're here, because we're here. It was a recursive lament, an acknowledgement that there was no why, that life in the trenches was meaninglessness all the way down. But that night in 2004, Amy transformed the song for me without ever changing the words. That night, Amy made me understand that we were here, meaning that we were together, and that even when we felt alone, we weren't, not really, because we were part of a vast and deeply interconnected us. And also that we were here, that in a series of astonishing unlikelihoods had made us possible and here possible and brought together a group of people that had never existed before and would never exist again. And that we might never know why we are here, but that we can still proclaim in hope that we are here. Amy made me feel in that moment what I have believed ever since, that hope is not foolish or idealistic or misguided. Hope that life will get better, and more importantly, that life will go on, is the correct response to the arc of history. As Emily Dickinson wrote, hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. And so even though I do truly hate audience participation, I hope you will join me in singing in Amy's memory and in her hope. We're here because we're here, because we're here, because we're here. We're here because we're here, because we're here, because we're here. We're here because we're here, because we're here, because we're here. We're here because we're here, because we're here, because we're here. Thank you again to everyone for being here, and to Linsner, and to Politics and Prose, and to all of you, and to my brother. Thank you so much. Thank you, guys. We're going to do a couple more bits. The first bit, again, requires just a tiny bit of audience participation. Is there anyone in the audience named Caroline? Just hands up. Yes, there is a Caroline. Hey. Are you aware that there is a song about your name?
You may have heard it more times than you'd like. It's like, you go, sweet Caroline. And that's a thing that happens. And you know what you feel like right now is that everybody in this place just said, ba, ba, ba. But it's not what happened.
No.
It was a lot of you, but there was a bunch of people who also didn't. They just didn't say ba ba ba. You can never know. I love these audience participation moments where people all sort of know what to do and they do it together, and there are these big collective moments where we're participating, but if it's a noise, you never know. Some people might be going,
you never know if everybody is truly in it together. And then there's that second bit where it's like, good times never seem so good. Again, not everybody said so good, so good, so good.
I watched several people not do it.
And we have no way of knowing who said it and who didn't. We didn't have a true moment of togetherness just then.
That's true.
The only way we can have a true moment of togetherness
is for 1,500 people, all at the same time, not to bump, bump, bump.
And this is an experiment we're doing. This is the second night. I will say, New York did a very good job, like way better than I expect. It's hard. So there's two things that can happen. One, you can be a person who's just like, well, I don't care about togetherness. I'm gonna bop, 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 and everybody's gonna look at me. Or you can just be like, I forgot in the moment between when you were talking about it and when it happened, it was like, bop, bop, oh no, it was me. Yeah. It's hard to keep it. It happened last night. One person did one bob, and the second bob. There's two.
There's two bobs. There's one so good, so good, so good, and there's two bobs. And you're gonna feel the urge.
Oh God, yeah.
We all will. It's gonna be incredibly hard, but I will tell you, if we can do it, if we can have that moment of true togetherness, nothing that you have ever experienced will feel as good as that does. I don't want to overpromise, but it's the best I've ever felt. With apologies to the birth of my children and the day of my marriage. We're gonna do this together, guys. We can do it. By the way, you can just be completely silent the whole time if you want.
That also works. When it began, I can't begin to know it. But that's every bugaboo. Wasn't the spring. The spring became the summer. Who'd have believed you'd come along?
Here we go.
Hands, touching hands, reaching out,
It's coming, remember.
touching me, touching you.
We can do this.
Sweet Caroline.
We're gonna do it again. We can do it. We're close.
New York did it.
You can do it. It's gonna happen. We're gonna give it one more try.
Sweet Caroline.
Seems so good.
I'd be inclined
To believe it never would, but
now. That's all we're gonna do.
All right, thank you again to everybody for being here tonight, and to Politics and Prose for supporting this event. Please support your local bookstore. Here in Washington, D.C., y'all are very lucky to have a lot of great bookstores. Politics and Prose is one of them, but there are also many others. And I can tell you that we are not as lucky in Indianapolis, so keep them. And thanks again to everybody at George Washington University and this amazing festival. It's just been a blast. I have a favorite band, and this is a song by that band. And it's a song about every year, but it is really especially a song about this year.
I broke free on a Saturday morning, put my pedal to the floor, headed north on Mills Avenue, and listened to the engine roar. My broken house behind me and good things ahead. A girl named Kathy wants a little of my time. 6 cylinders underneath the hood, crashing and kicking. I listen to the engine whine, and I'm gonna make it through this year if it kills me. I'm gonna make it through this year if it kills me. I played video games in a drunken haze. I was 17 years young.